I don't know what happened. I got cut off. Here's part two. Here we go. But again, looking at experimental research, you are trying to directly manipulate one variable in the independent variable to see how it affects the dependent variable. So, going on talking about our fake study. So this is where we start really talking about experimental research. So, um, establishing causal relationships between variables, that's the purpose of experimental research. Um, Variable is anything that can change. Again, an independent variable is one that you manipulate. Dependent variable is the one that you are going to look at to see how it changes in response to your manipulation of the independent variable. An operational definition, a definition that provides an objective description of how a variable will be measured and observed in a study. So, looking at our fake experiment, Dr. Starbucks, what she's going to do is she has a population. She works at a college, so she has access to all these college students. That's her population. She's going to take a sample of 100 of them, and she's going to pick them randomly. She's not just going to pick people who she knows or something like that. Everybody in the population has an equal chance of being picked, and that's random assignment or random sampling. And for out of these 100 people, she is going to give them $20 and maybe free coffee, depending on which group they're in. She's going to say, hey, I need you at the lab at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Don't eat or drink anything before you come. Just show up at the lab at 9 o'clock and on an empty stomach. Okay? That's what I need you to do. So, if everything goes well, she's going to have 100 people show up at 9 a.m. at the lab the next morning. She's going to take 50 of them and she's going to give them either water or milk, something without caffeine. The other 50 she is going to give Starbucks coffee. See what I did there? But the thing is that group that does not get caffeinated beverage, they are part of a control group. Okay? The people who get coffee are part of the experimental group because that caffeine is your independent variable. It's what you're manipulating. And your hypothesis is that the people who got the coffee are going to blink more. So your independent variable is coffee or caffeine. Your dependent variable is the number of blinks. In your operational definition, you want to say, what exactly is a blink? What if I do this? Is that a blink? I only blinked one eye. Maybe I thought the researcher was cute and I was trying to flirt with him. So I do a wink instead. Versus maybe somebody who's doing this constantly. Is that a blink or am I falling asleep? You don't know. So for an operational definition, you are going to sit there and say, it's going to be 1 to 2 seconds. Not only one eye is not a wink, or not a blink, it's a wink. If it's for more than 1 minute, then they're taking a nap. They're not winking or they're not blinking. And then she's also Starbucks is also going to accumulate all of the research that she can already find that's been found on the subject. And that's a meta-analysis. What she's going to do is she's going to go and she's going to find these studies and find maybe not studies on this, but maybe closely related ones. And to kind of bring all this home. And the meta-analysis is just going to look at all of the research that already exists on this. Okay? So your experimental group, these are the people who get a drug or treatment or intervention, in our case, caffeine. So those people that get that stimulant, those are going to be your experimental group, while your people who get milk or water or whatever it is going to be your control group. Now, external validity and internal validity. External validity is how well these findings generalize to the regular world. In the grand scheme of things, who cares how many times you blink? Well, offhand, seemingly no one, but optometrists and ophthalmologists, they care about eye lubrication, so they may be interested in this study, versus other psychiatrists, psychologists, counselors, whatever. They may look at this and not say, okay, well, blinking doesn't really mean anything, but it's part of a startle reflex. What startle reflex is how easily you start. So, how many times does somebody have to call your name? How much are you on edge? How much are you paying attention? And they say, hey, blinking doesn't really mean much, but maybe it's an indicator of a higher startle reflex. So, maybe that's something to look for. But your external validity, which I'm not going to lie, from outside looking in, this has pretty low external validity, but it's how useful this information is. Now, internal validity is the integrity of your study. So, you want to have really high internal validity, because the higher your internal validity, the more certain you can say, yes, the manipulation of my independent variable caused this, nothing else did. And that's why internal validity is so important. And that's why, Starbucks needs to have the best researchers she can find. She doesn't want kids who sit there surfing their Insta feed. She wants somebody who's actively paying attention to the participants and genuinely trying to record the number of blinks, because that is the most accurate information, or the most accurate data that she can accumulate. So hopefully that makes sense. Placebo is a fake harmless substance that has no effect on when given to participants in a control group. So, for example, that group that gets water or milk, that's not going to hurt them unless they're lactose intolerant. This is why you ask these questions. Or you just stick with water. But you know that what you're seeing is not a result of their water drinking. Okay? You know for a fact that whenever this happens, it's a placebo. So, and it's just something, in drug trials, they will give some people an actual medication, they will give other people a sugar pill. And that way they know if they see a decrease in symptoms, it's genuinely related to the pill that they've received, not, anything else. So, a double-blind experiment, people genuinely don't know which group they're in. So me as the researcher, I'm just going to hand out these pills, and it may have a cup with their name on it. And I say, here you go, here you go, here you go. I'm not going to know whether the pill that they're getting is actually a medication or if it's sugar. And that is to keep me from acting a certain way towards them. And it's also for them to not know whether they're getting an actual medication or if they're getting sugar. And then your population is the whole group of people that you want to make conclusions about, while your sample is a portion that you recruit for this study. Again, random sample or random assignment is where every person involved has an equal chance of being picked. Descriptive statistics, we're talking pretty much about numbers here. Mathematical procedures that are used to describe and summarize sets of data in a meaningful way. So measures of central tendency. And just kind of numbers in general. We're just kind of throwing something out there. I included in the PowerPoint a link for a study where it says 27% of 18 to 34-year-olds would form a relationship with a robot. It's just a percentage. That doesn't potentially explain why anything happens. All that does is it takes those people that it talked to, and it formed a mathematical representation of how many people answered yes to a certain question or stated a certain belief or what have you. So that's what that does. Inferential statistics is a little bit different. So I included on that one, it's a study where long-term alcohol use has been linked to liver cancer. Again, you can't say that it causes it, but you're getting closer to an answer. So hopefully that makes sense. So talking about measures of central tendency, your mode is going to be the numbers that come up the most often. So 17, 24, 17, 42, 17, 23. Mode is 17 because it's the one that keeps coming up. It's the one that's most featured. Your mean is going to be an average, where you take a set of numbers, you add them up and divide by how many numbers you have. So your mean is pretty much your average, and your median is the number that's in the middle. If you have an odd number, then it's that number right there in the middle of your data set. If it is an even set of numbers, then you have to take those two middle and take an average of them. And then informed consent. Informed consent is an important part of experimentation, in that you have to let people know what you're doing. So whenever you take these people that you're going to be doing a study with, you may not tell them what exactly you're looking for. For example, if I tell people, hey, we're doing a study on how many times you blink, they may sit there and try not to blink as much in order to, cause a certain result, versus they may be nervous once you tell them that, and they may blink excessively. You don't know. So what you do is you tell them that you are looking at something else. So, you may say, oh, we're looking at how it affects your skin. And we're checking to see if your skin's more luminous or something like that. And yes, that is deception. But what you're doing is trying to get the most accurate data possible. What informed consent does is you tell them that, hey, this is what you're studying, you do your experiment, and then you come back and you debrief them. What that means is you tell them the truth. So, you come back and you say, hey, I know we said that we were looking at how coffee affects your appetite or how bright your skin is or something like this, but we were actually looking at how many times you blinked. People are going to probably give you a weird look, but it is what you're doing. And you have an obligation to tell them the truth at the end. Also, you're not really hurting anyone by saying, no, we're studying this instead, but you still come back and you for the integrity of your experiment, you tell them what you were really looking for. Another thing is confidentiality. With psychology, oftentimes we look at things like depression and anxiety and things like that. And the thing is, if we go screaming around the world, hey, so-and-so has massive anxiety or so-and-so is depressed, why would anyone tell us the truth? So confidentiality is, you keep people's identity a secret. You don't have, and this was something that I saw even when I was in college, that you may have to take questionnaires or surveys or something like that, and the teacher would be like, oh, just put it in my box. Technically, you're not really supposed to do that, because other people could walk by his box and say, oh, hey, look at this. It's a Beck depressive inventory. Wow, Kristen's really depressed. That's bad. And then put it up, and then, the next time they see me, Kristen, are you okay? I saw your Beck depressive inventory. And I'm going to be like, what the hell, man? That was supposed to be a secret. That was supposed to be between us. And it's going to affect the way that they treat me. So confidentiality is really important, because if I am depressed and a professor or a counselor or somebody asks me about that, I'm less likely to be honest if I know they're going to go around telling my business. Hopefully that makes sense. But I think that about covers it for that. Looking at the quizzes, in case you didn't notice, this week's has 53, which is way over the 25 that you need for this chapter or whatever. Extra credit. Enjoy it. Use it if you need to. It's there. I changed it on Canvas too. Remember, your grade is a reflection of the number of points that you have. So that percentage column is kind of obsolete. Whenever I do your grading, I'm going to be looking specifically at the amount of points that you have. So hopefully that helps. First step in the scientific method, you got to observe some things. You got to see what you're interested in. What are things that you notice? So observing some phenomena in the world. In the context of scientific method, a theory is closely related ideas and things that we accept as true until we have a better explanation for them. So for example, gravity. Gravity is a theory. We have this thing that says, hey, whenever we fall at a certain rate. It is 0.08, and gravity is just the best explanation that we have for that. So a set of closely related ideas that attempt to explain observations. Let's see, an educated guess that derives logically from a theory. It's a hypothesis. It is a tested or testable educated guess. That's all a hypothesis is. Objective description of a behavior. It's going to be an operational definition. A statistical procedure that summarizes a large body of evidence from the research literature on a particular topic. This is what I was talking about with Starbucks accumulating all the research that she could find on blinking and caffeine consumption. That's a meta-analysis. You're just simply going through and looking at the literature. Excuse me. Descriptive research. Research that uses surveys, case studies, interviews, and all you're doing is basic dimensions of a variable. You are providing a description, descriptive research. What does this look like? A set of questions to people's self-reported attitudes or beliefs. You're looking at a survey. Survey method. Say, for example, you have a doctor who go around and asks, how many times do you do this? That is part of a survey method. So Dr. Frank asking people how many hours of television they watch per week. An in-depth look at a single individual. It's going to be a case study. Again, going back to Phineas Gage. Case study, in-depth look at a single individual. Oops, put that on there more than once. Just rack up the points from it. It's cool. Aaron wants to study the association between sleep deprivation and the number of hours spent on the computer every day. He doesn't need to know causation. All he's looking at is the relationship between the two, and that's going to be correlational research. Psychological research, correlational study is just used to look at the links between variables. You're not trying to explain why. All you know is that when one thing happens, the other one does this. The numerical value is correlation coefficient. All it is a number showing you how strong the relationship is between the two. Strong positive correlation, again, is one variable goes up, so does the other. So class attendance and grades, for example. As one increases, so does the other. Chris makes an observation that the longer a classroom lecture, the lower the attentiveness of the students. So as time goes up, students' attention goes down. It's an example of a negative correlation. Again, Dr. Klaus, positive correlation. As the number of hours of study go up, so did their performance in the test. As one goes up, so does the other one. That is a positive correlation. Potential problem of using correlation, not really a problem because at this point we just accept it as truth. You can't say one thing causes the other. So, if you want to determine a causal relationship, you use experimental method. In context of psychological research, an experiment is closely regulated procedure in which the researcher manipulates one or more variables. Talked a little bit about that, how in an experiment you directly manipulate one variable. So Dr. Gillespie conducts an experiment on childhood aggression. She has two groups in her experiment. Group A, who she puts people in if they get a head on their coin. If they get a tail, then she puts them in Group B. It's an example of random assignment. Problem with that is you may end up with an unequal number of people in each group, but that's not my business. That's up to Dr. Gillespie. Again, random assignment. All you're doing is ensuring that everybody has an equal likelihood of being put in a group. An experimental study, the independent variable. Again, you have the freedom to manipulate the independent variable. You manipulate the experimental factor in an experiment to see what its effects are. Professor Simpson is examining, this is question 23 by the way, the effects of color on anxiety levels. She randomly assigns patients to a room painted either white or black and then records their blood pressure. The independent variable in this would be the room color because that's the only thing that she's changing is what color room they're put in. And then she looks at the blood pressure, which is the dependent variable. So Dr. Kingston, a psychologist, is examining how a student's reading level is differently affected by two variables, either being tutored by a TA or being tutored by a computer-based program. So that's your independent variable, whether they have a human tutor or if they have a computer program. And the dependent variable is how fast they read. A history class of 50 students has agreed to be the subject of a research study. Half the class has been asked to study for the next history test while listening to classical music. The remaining half has been asked to study completely silent. The test scores of the two groups will be compared at the end of the variable. What is the dependent variable? The test scores. Because you're looking at what's affected. And it may not be affected, you don't know. But you have half of them listen to classical music, half of them not, and then you compare their test results to see if they're in need different. Experimental research study, which of the following is an experimental group, the group that is subjected to the change the independent variable represents. An experimental research study control group is the group that is not subjected to the manipulated independent variable. These are the groups that you are just looking to see what happens if you don't do anything. Experimental group consists of participants in a study who are exposed to the changes that an independent variable represents. I feel like I'm repeating myself a lot here. Independent variable, know the variables. Know the difference between independent and dependent. Know the differences between an experimental group and a control group. These are things that you will need not only for this class, but for future classes. Guarantee you this is going to be stuff that you see on the test too. So, external validity, the extent to which the experimental design reflects real-world issues. So, how much do we actually care that people blink for whenever we give them coffee? Again, presenting with pretty low external validity, but, that's okay. In the context of experimental research, internal validity refers to the extent to which the changes in the dependent variable are genuinely due to the manipulation of the independent variable. So how for sure are you that the manipulation of the independent variable caused what you actually see? If you have high internal validity, then that's pretty high. But, if you are sitting there and you're not really paying attention to your sample or to your participants, and maybe your data is wrong, you can't say for sure or is with high certainty that, yes, this is definitely what caused what we see. Influence of a researcher's expectations on the outcome of a study. That's experimenter bias. So, smoking cessation study. Guy goes in and gets Nicorette, and he comes back the next week and the nurse asks him, how many times did you smoke last week? 12. Oh. Okay. Well, he comes back the next week and it goes down from 12 to 7. Okay, good. So you're seeing a decline in the behavior, but was that caused by the Nicorette or was that caused by Nurse Nancy's side eye? That's experimenter bias, because the participant will change their behavior according to how he wants to be treated by other people. Maybe he doesn't like getting the side eye from Nurse Nancy, so it's going to influence his behavior. Well, as an experimenter, I'm going to be like, good, look, the Nicorette is working. We don't know that it's because Nurse Nancy is kind of mean and throwing shade at people. Okay? Dale, a researcher, conducts a study to determine the effects of color blue on mood. During the study, he is friendlier towards the female participants than he is towards the male. Don't do that. That's just rude. Which makes the women feel more relaxed during the study. He concludes that color blue is more likely to have a relaxing effect on men and women. Is that actually because of the color blue? No, it's because of the way the experimenter treated them, which is a result of experimenter bias. Placebo effect is an experimental study. In an experimental study refers to the participants' expectations producing an outcome. So, again, maybe a drug trial. You have somebody who has convinced themselves they know they're getting the real medication. So they come in and they're like, yeah, I'm feeling great. Well, is it because the medication's actually working or just because they think they're getting the medication? So it's made them feel better because they think that they're getting this intervention. In a drug study, a placebo is a harmless substance, oftentimes a sugar pill. It doesn't really have any effect on anything. It is just there so that both groups are identical. So everyone gets a pill. A double-blind study, neither the experimenter nor the participant knows if they're getting real deal or if they're getting something fake. Let's see, the advantage of a double-blind experiment. The participants can't act a certain way according to what they think they're getting, and the experimenter can't treat them a certain way according to what they think they're getting, because really at the end, nobody knows. It ensures that neither the experimenter nor the participants' expectations affect the outcome of the experiments. When psychologists conduct a study, the group of participants chosen for the study is your sample. Remember, your population is the whole group of people that you're looking at. Your sample is just the people recruited for the study. When psychologists conduct a study, a blank sample, random sample. Everyone has an equal chance at being selected. The whole group of people, again, your population. Context of research settings. Researchers who use blank attempt to view their behavior without disturbing the environment. Again, when you're going to research kindergartners, it's a naturalistic observation. You want things to be as normal as possible. Justin, a psychologist, wants to study the behavior of call center employees when they attend a call. Which of the following research would be most effective for this? Naturalistic observation. You don't want people to be nicer just because their boss is in the room, okay? So you're going to sit there and you're going to try and just blend in. So, descriptive statistics. The blank is determined by adding up participant scores and dividing the number of scores. That's your average, which is your mean. This one gives an example with numbers of the mean. You just simply add them up. 10, 10, 15, 25, and 40, which is going to be, I don't know. Your mean's going to be 20, though. I can't do this without a calculator. Dross doesn't math, guys. I'm really sorry. Same group of, or different group of numbers, 10, 10, 20, 30, and 50, which are the median of these. It's going to be 20, and it's because it's that middle number. You have 2 on one side, 2 on the other. 10, 10, 20, and then 30 and 50. So, and again, it's that one directly in the middle. That's your median. The mode is the most common score in the sample. So, again, 17, 21, 17, 23, 17, 32. 17 keeps popping up because it's the one that occurs the most. That is your mode. Again, another numerical example, 22, 22, 35, 45, and 50. 22 keeps popping up. It is the number most frequently in that sample of numbers. So that is your mode. In descriptive statistics, range is the difference between the lowest and the highest. This isn't one that I went over. But what you're going to do is you'll have a set of numbers. You'll take the biggest number and subtract the smallest number from it, and that's going to be your range. So it is the dispersion that is the difference between the highest and lowest scores. Aaron wants to study people's reaction to violent images. He lets all the participants of his experiment know that they will see violent images and ask if they are willing to participate. That is obtaining informed consent. You're letting them know what to expect. First step in the scientific method of psychology is formulating hypotheses and predictions. No, you have to observe things first. Can't really come up with a testable hypothesis or a testable guess if you haven't noticed something to begin with. In psychology, a correlational research study tells the variable which is the cause and which is the effect. False. Correlation does not equal causation. I don't know how many times I need to say it. Hopefully you've gotten it by now. Hopefully I'm just repeating myself a lot. Correlation does not equal causation. That is false. In an experiment, the independent variable is what the experimenter arranges or has control to allow a comparison. That is true. That is the one that they have the freedom to manipulate. That's the independent variable. And then in a psychological experiment, the experimental group is exposed to the change that the independent variable represents. Yes. So you're going to manipulate the independent variable and see how it changes the dependent one. Then double-blind experiments are conducted in an effort to rule out experimenter bias as well as participant bias. That is true. So sorry about this being 2 videos. Hopefully that's not going to throw anybody off too bad. Also, if I was not in depth with something as you need me to be, let me know. I will go back and amend that or type up a little something, whatever we need to do. But let me know how this is going. Let me know what you think of the format so far. And by all means, again, please, if you have questions, let me know. But hopefully this is just expanding on stuff that you've already read and makes sense. So let me know what you need, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye.